So, good afternoon, everyone. We are starting then our webinar. This is session 3F, Life Cycle Approaches for Sustainability. And we will be having 4 presentations. Each participant will have 7 minutes for each presentation. And at 2 minutes, I will do something like this. So you could go forward until the end. I will be taking the time. After all the presentation, we will be having a discussion, and that's it. So our first presenter is Mark Mistry from Nickel Institute of Belgium. Mark, maybe you can share your slides.
Yes, and I hope you can see them in a minute.
We can see it. We can see it. We are in your 8th slide. So that's it, and everything seems to be okay. Mark will be talking about the more accurate life cycle assessment for the product of the mining and metal sectors. Thank you, Mark. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I think that some of you were expecting Louise Assem from the International Copper Association doing this presentation. She is the chair of the Life Cycle Management Working Group at ICMM. Unfortunately, she had a commitment and asked me to replace her. So I hope that I can deliver this presentation and contribute afterwards also to the discussion. So first of all, who is ICMM? I think that it is an organization that might be known to some of you. It's actually the international association representing the mining and metals industry. You can see here on this slide 24 companies, world leading mining and metal producing companies who are members of ICMM. As you can see in the headline, the focus is on setting the standard for responsibly produced mineral and metals in a safe, just, and sustainable world. Besides these 24 members, ICMM has also metal associations such as the Nickel Institute or the International Copper Association, as well as mining federations in their membership. And I would like to talk about the work that we are doing in this lifecycle management working group that is chaired by Louise. So when you look into LCAs in lifecycle assessments, and when you follow, for example, the ISO protocol or the greenhouse gas protocol, you will see that often enough, first of all, the concepts which are developed in these protocols and standards are very generic. That's done on purpose, as the aim is to develop a framework that can be used by all industries and economic activities. But that comes with a challenge, which means that often enough, these LCA models are not specific to mining and metals, and they are quite kept generic, and that is causing problems. And on the other side, we also see that often enough, when you run a life cycle assessment, you're relying on data. When you are doing assessments, you're relying on data, and they are often enough outdated. And then we have some specific aspects where we see limitations in these generic concepts that can be found in LCAs, like, for example, resource depletion. So this concept that once you extract a resource from the environment, it is gone. Toxicity in metals, which is not acknowledging important aspects such as, for example, essentiality of metals or bioavailability. We have this area of allocation that is very critical, as often enough metals production is multimetallic, and then tailings management. And so when you want to put it into generic points, they are listed here. For the sake of time, I'm not going through them. On the next slide, you can see that at ICMM, we are doing work which is jointly funded by, on the one side, ICMM, on the other side, by member associations. We have here a few of them listed with copper, cobalt, aluminium, nickel, molybdenum, zinc, two national mining federations. And the aim of our activities is there are three buzzwords listed here: sound and sustainable production and use, science-based policies, and improved life cycle assessment. So that is driving our agenda since a couple of years and is going to drive our agenda also in the coming years. The work that we have been doing since 2017 is focusing on four key elements. So toxicity is a critical one, where we want to ensure that the whole concept, this impact category, is also appropriate for metals. Resource use, as said, there we have this misconception that once you extract a resource from the environment, it is gone. And that is something that does not apply to metals. Mining tailings, that's another big issue for us, as we can see that often enough there are unrealistic scenarios formulated when looking into the long-term impacts. And finally, as a kind of overarching item, we have the harmonization of practices. I'm going to talk about this at the very end. This is a very detailed description of what we have been doing since 2017. As you can see, in the first years, our focus was on metals toxicity. I can mention that this is right now again on our agenda, while in the first stages we were focusing on providing data. This is right now looking into, on the one side, data, but on the other side also looking into the model as such. On resource use, resource depletion, we developed a new concept. When I say we, I have to mention that we are working closely together with relevant academics and the LCA community. So when we talk about metals toxicity, then we are looking to collaborate with USTOX, resource use. We have worked together with the Danish Technical University, with BRGM. On harmonization of practices, there's a close collaboration with the University of Twente and mine tailings. As you can see, that's one of the new items that we have on our agenda, where we are looking into the conceptual approaches that are underlying the whole discussion. And I would like to come to the conclusion, knowing that I only have 7 minutes, so another 35 seconds left. A key aspect of our work is that we are actually on harmonizing the way how LCAs for metals and minerals are done. So there's a lot of work ongoing. You can see here the approach that we are following with the ISO and the Greenhouse Gas Protocol as kind of overarching concept. ICMM is working on guidance, and then we have sector guidance that you can find on the website of the different metal commodity associations, including the one of the Nickel Institute. So I stayed within the 7 minutes and happy to discuss later on in the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mark. Now we will be having Benedict Berkis. I hope I try to pronounce it well, but he will be talking about the evaluation of industrial and urban symbiosis indicators, focusing on assessing environmental aspects for a comprehensive indicator overview, scoping review. Benedict comes from Aachen University in Germany. Go on.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. Yeah, so Lorena introduced me. My name is Benedikt Verkic, and I will give you an overview about my research with the topic evaluation of industrial and urban symbiosis indicators to give, which is focusing on assessing environmental aspects to give a comprehensive indicator overview, which I have done through a scoping review. So at first for the agenda, I will start with the relevance and goal of the work, to go over to the key findings of the scoping review, and give you, in the end, the conclusions of my work. So at first, the background of my research is the analysis of the evaluation options for industrial parks. And for this, the KRIGI project, my research is located within the KRIGI project. KRIGI stands for Climate and Resource Protection in Commercial and Industrial Areas. So the goal of the KRIGI project is to reduce the environmental impact of industrial parks. This is done through formulating actions to support environmental benefits. The KRIGI project encompasses all life cycle phases of an industrial park, including planning, construction, and the operation phase. Now my scoping review is focusing on the operation phase to give an overview of possibilities for evaluating industrial symbiosis and urban symbiosis. Industrial symbiosis and urban symbiosis are included within the scoping review because these are approaches to reduce environmental impacts and therefore essential for the operation phase. At the end, this indicator overview shall enable an efficient indicator selection for companies, industrial park operators, and urban administrations. The first aspect of the key findings are the indicator uses. So for the scoping review, I screened approximately 4,000 sources and 457 sources were included within the research. These 457 sources then had approximately 3,000 indicators, which I then clustered into 618 key indicators. So for example, the indicators water use and water demand were clustered into one indicator. Based on these indicators, I formulated 4 categories, which was done iteratively. And these indicator categories are named environment and emissions, symbiosis and sharing, energy, as well as material waste and water. 89% of the indicators could be assigned to one of those 4 categories, and 11% could not be assigned into one of those 4 and were assigned into the 5th category, other. Also, the use of indicators in the context of the categories was analyzed over time. So you can see here on the right side the figure with on the x-axis the year and on the y-axis the sum of sources for all indicators in a certain category. There you can see that environment and emissions and material waste and water are the prevailing categories and are also increasing in the last years. For the use over time of the application areas, you can see this heat map. So on the y-axis, now not the categories, but the application areas are shown. So urban symbiosis and industrial symbiosis are within the research focus and also the combination of both. But to give a comprehensive overview, we also included agro-industrial parks, EIP, and circular economy on the meso level. You can see that especially industrial symbiosis and agro-industrial parks are the main focus of the literature and of the sources. Coming to the most used indicators, we used the average use rate as one parameter to evaluate the indicators. Average use rate is defined by the number of uses in literature divided by the sum of sources. And here you can see the categories with each average use rate. The highest use rate has the category environment and emissions, followed by material waste and water, and close behind energy. Symbiosis and sharing has the lowest average use rate. With the average use rate spanning between 2 and 6, you can also see that in the sources, the 457 sources, have a high variety of the indicators and indicator uses. Coming to the top 5 most used indicators, you can see them here with their uses. So the topics are encompassing CO2 and carbon emissions, as well as global warming, climate change, energy and power, as well as waste generation and water use. The uses span between 67 and 111 uses, and these indicators were also clustered or assigned to the categories. Yet you can see that none of the top 5 most used indicators is assigned to the category symbiosis and sharing. This is because The top 3 most used indicators for the category symbiosis and sharing only have 8 to 20 uses, with topics encompassing centralized waste or wastewater treatment facilities, waste exchanged, and information or knowledge sharing networks. This shows that the category symbiosis and sharing is not a focus in the most used indicators. Coming to the conclusions, you can see that industrial and urban symbiosis is gaining increased attention also within the last years, and that our indicator overview could be usable for decision making on how to evaluate industrial and urban symbiosis. This is, for example, usable for companies, industrial park operators, and urban administrations. So, for example, the most used indicators could serve as a basis for relevance and for developing an assessment framework. It is also seen that for the indicators that they mostly cover the effects of a symbiosis instead of the symbiosis itself. It is also to be kept in mind that the categories are a suggestion to evaluate indicators, and if you change the definition of the categories, of course, the results would change too. So thank you for your attendance, and feel free to ask questions in the end. And you can see on the left side the Kriegi website with a QR code linked. On the right side, if you want to contact me, my employee site. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benedict. Our next presentation is paper number 168, the ISO 14075 standard for the social life cycle assessment. Marcia Traverso from Aachen University in Germany will be presenting this research. Marcia.
Thank you. Thank you, Lorena. Thank you, everyone, to be there. Yes, I will try to give you really a short overview. What are the main points of the ISO 40075? I added you. Can you see my screen, right? Can you see already the presentation?
Perfect.
Wonderful. So we know that, strangely, the ISO 40075 was developed under the usual environmental management TC 207, SC5, that mainly was that developed the LCA methodology and also standard. But our working group was the 15, and we start in April 2025. We likely manage in 2024, November or even December, to publish the ISO norm. As you can see, we had the 41 expert. It was a mix between social expert and ISO norm, ISO 40040 and 44 expert, and with a very good distribution in terms of country spread in the world. So when we started to develop, the standard development is 3 years, so we have 36 months. We start from using as a reference mainly the UNEP guidelines, the 2020 version, and together with the ISO 40040 and 44. So we combine. I was a project leader and convener, so I was responsible to put together this first draft. And then after several meetings, in particular the ones we needed actually a further meeting in February 2024, because there were necessity to find further consensus in a couple of points that I will explain you in a minute. So the result is of this, because always ISO norm is always a compromise. You find the most description in the chapter 6 that give a methodological framework of the ISO of the social LCA, and you will find already. If you're familiar with the SLCA, you know that mainly we go with what's called the type 1, so with the reference scale approach. Today we are talking about reference scale assessment. So we really split the two methodology, type 1 and type 2, that before under UNEP were under the same scope, social life cycle impact assessment. Now we differentiate clearly between reference scale assessment and social life cycle impact assessment. So, but before to understand, I mean, as all the ISO, you have at the beginning the definition and terminology so that you are aligned with the current terminology when you are reading the ISO. And so I would definitely suggest you to look at it. And in particular, we called with the social life cycle performance assessment is that the result coming from the reference scale that use actually the reference scale assessment methodology. So now we have not anymore social life cycle impact assessment and then type 2, type 1, type 2, but we have social life cycle performance assessment with reference scale assessment and social life cycle impact assessment with the impact pathway. Okay, so at the end, also in the chapter 5, before actually the framework, that before we clearly go step by step on the methodology, we clearly then give which are the 3 options. I mean, one is also when we talk about environmental LCA, we have social life cycle inventory, so life cycle inventory in the environmental. And here we have a social life cycle inventory as well. And then we have the 2 others. They are social life cycle performance assessment and social life cycle assessment, under what we have a social life cycle impact assessment. So the step mandatory for obtain what is the reference scale assessment is, of course, selection of impact categories, definition of the reference scale and benchmark. So it's important to give like where you want to go. So it's more approach distance to target. So the benchmark we want to arrive or reach with our performance, and then the assignment of social life cycle impact assessment result to the select impact categories, and then application of reference scale to the social life cycle inventory result to obtain the final performance. In the reference scale assessment, also in the ISO, we define what is a performance reference point. That is the reference, the way, the goal or the reference point where we want to go in terms of our performance. So this is also clearly defined also in the ISO norm. And there we don't give which scale. I mean, it's just some example. You can have a scale with the 3 numbers, with the 3 value, 3 level. You can have a 5 level. You can have even 10. So it depends. That's up to you. As always, the ISO norm cannot give a specific, cannot suggest one or the other's methodology, but can or prefer one of the other methodology, but only give suggestion. For the social life cycle impact assessment, I won't stay long because I mean this is exactly what we have in environmental. So we have the impact pathway approach, and then what I mean in my slide, you will have my slide as well. I can suggest you example like a fair salary potential. That's one of the example of impact pathway that you can use. Last 2, and then I'm closing. Actually, what is new? Another important things, we allow weighting. So because we recognize that it's important for identify different along the supply chain, along the product life cycle, we can have a different way to weight actually the different unit process, because one can be more relevant than the others, depends, for example, on the worker hours. And we also allow, we don't suggest, but we allow also aggregation. So you can combine more along the product life cycle, but as well with the different indicators at the same subcategories, because usually we have more than one indicator. But it's important is what we really highlight also in the ISO is that once you aggregate in one value, you have to report transparently also the data or the result before the aggregation, so that everyone can see what is the result without the aggregation, because we cannot offset positive and negative without clearly says what are the positive and negative impact. Last slide, we also recognize clearly, as we have in environmental LCA, the importance of critical review. So actually, in the ISO norm, if you have a comparative assertion in social, you need to have a critical review. Thank you. I try to give you.
Thank you, Marcia. We will have a moment for discussion. So for the audience, if you have some questions, some suggestions, some indications that you would like to expose during the discussion, just go for the Q&A and you noted it, and then at the end we will be reviewing it with the speakers. Our last speaker, number 112, circularity indicators and sustainability life cycle assessment applied to innovative processes for recovering finest waste stream. Our speaker will be Stefan Dietrich, Helmholtz-Zentrum Dresden, Rosendorf in Germany. Sorry for the awful.
Don't worry. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Welcome, everybody.
I did my best.
It's a pleasure to present the project Finage, which deals with innovative processes for recovering finest waste streams. And of course, when you develop these processes, you need to assess these by, in our case, circularity indicators and life cycle assessment as well. It's a project that is funded by the Helmholtz Association in Germany under the Sustainable Challenge funding scheme and comprises 4 Helmholtz centers and 2 universities in Germany. And we tackle a challenge that is often not addressed and that occur throughout the whole life cycle or value chains, finest particulates from anthropogenic origins, such as when it comes to extraction, we have a lot of mine waste that composes of finest waste. Also, when we go to the production of products, in this example, we have a lot of metal dust that comes through the processing. And at end of life of products, when it comes to recycling, we also see that we produce a lot of fine waste streams, such as shredder fines, for example. We try to contribute to sustainable value chains by developing innovative technological solutions and try to transfer these into industry through brains. It means PhD students who go to industry afterwards. And we address several sustainable development goals and act in line with the EU Green Deal. The project itself is structured into 3 sub-projects, which are dedicated to the certain waste streams. For example, microplastics is sub-project 1. The second one is to mineral additives, which are part of many products and materials. And the final one is dedicated to metal elements in the waste streams. As you know, of course, we heard about life cycle assessment already. So that's one option, of course, to assess these new innovations, new products, new processes. And since last year, we also have the ISO series dedicated to circular economy, including also the standard on the metrics of circular economy. And in a certain sense, this is comparable to a life cycle assessment, especially in terms of its form, I would say. So we also have a definition phase where the goals of the study are defined. We have a phase where the measurement takes place compared to the inventory, maybe. In this, we are suggested to use 5 different indicator categories, like the resource inflow, resource outflow, energy, water, and economic aspects. And these are underlined by circularity indicators. Some of them are mandatory, some only optional. And afterwards, we have the evaluation with the aggregation of results and with the overall circularity performance. An example of this category with the indicators is this resource inflow. So we have average reused content, average recycled content, and average renewable content of this material or product. Summed up by the virgin non-renewable content, we come to the 100% of resource inflow. And mandatory in this under this standard are resource inflow and resource outflow only. The others are optional. So energy water and economic aspects. In Finest, we developed biotech alternatives to recycle plastic. And we do this by finding microorganisms like bacteria or fungi, or to engineer certain targeted enzymes or polymer-specific anchoring peptides that are targeting at the various types of plastics, and then depolymerize it to monomers again, which can be then used for virgin production again. Here we can see that this consumes energy, water, material, and is of economic cost, of course. And for the second sub-project, we did a study on ethics, which is external thermal insulation composite system made up of a lot of polystyrene and also mineral additives that can make up to 30%. That's fillers, flame retardants, or pigments. And in the study, we saw that it's expected to quadruple the waste generation from this by 2050 in Germany. So we need alternative recycling path as well as an improved waste disposal policies. And here, one aspect could be our approach, that we split the input material into mineral additives, which can be sent to recycling cement, where these partially hazardous substances can be unitized. And the second stream would be the contaminated polystyrene, which undergoes a pyrolysis, for which we have end products, oil and gas, which can be then used in virgin production again. Also here, energy will be very crucial to look at. For the third sub-project, there we go for metal extraction, and we want to improve an oxidation reduction workflow for Teisenschlamm, which is a mine waste from former copper mining. And we will extract zinc and lead through the gas phase and concentrate other valuable metals in alloys of iron and copper. Additionally, we will improve the slag quality, and in this slag, also the toxic elements will go. This is supported by the characterization of these products, which is necessary to assess as well, of course. And so far we are in the simulation phase, as our plasma furnace is not yet operating, but soon it will be at the institute. And then you will probably see that energy, of course, is one of the main aspects of the assessment. To sum it up, we see that circularity indicators are very relevant to assess new innovative processes in order to say whether it's a contribution to a circular economy or not. And it needs to be very transparent and comprehensible. And the suggested indicators from the ISO norms seem to us very reasonable. But in addition, we think that specific circularity indicators could be of value as well. And we want to test these as well. And as I'm saying this, yet we could not really test it due to missing data for the processes developed, but the project will go on until 2027. So maybe in the next year we can do so. So consequently, the question whether the new approach could really be more circular is still open. And so am I for your questions now. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Stefan. Maybe you can take off your presentation?
Yes, I will manage.
Yeah. So we are open right now. We are open discussion. I don't know if there is some questions from the audience. But I have some questions. In your presentation, Mark, you enlightened us with 4 categories: resources depletion, toxicity, allocation, and tailing. And at least 2 or 3 times during your presentation, you reinforced an idea, which is that resources depletion is not like we take it and we dump it. It's like we use it. I would like you to explain a little bit more about that idea, the depletion versus use.
Yes, many thanks for that question. And I think it, to a certain extent, links to the presentation of Stefan. If you look into different raw materials that are used, you will see that there are some which are consumed. So when we look into, for example, the classical example would be fossil fuels, oil, coal, gas. there's a consumption. In the case of metals, what we can see is that we often say metals are used. So there's no consumption taking place for most of the applications that we observe. There are some applications where you can start discussing,
Yeah.
are the metals consumed, yes or no? But usually it's the metals remain metals. And therefore, for us, it was important to change this concept. So it's not that a resource is actually consumed,
Mhm.
but we are looking into other concepts where we try to explain that the issue is about ensuring that metals are coming back to the use phase. And this is
Okay.
where the work of Stefan might be
Yeah.
relevant, as we need to understand, first of all, what is actually depleted. As also in the case, it's an endless discussion. You can discuss, for example, about a copper deep sea cable connecting, North America with Europe. Once it is going out of use phase, is it available for a second life? Yes or no? And so it's a very detailed discussion that you might have, and that is addressed in this work that we have been doing and publishing.
And
The next step would be then to talk
Mhm.
about indicators on how to ensure that a maximum of this valuable resource that we place on the market is actually returned to society.
And to that point, I wanted to go in terms that at the end, it will be like, as Stefan was indicating in his research, a point of how do we do this recycling at the end, and how do we treat those finest waste. And I would like you to go a little bit forward, Stefan, since we have just 7 minutes and we couldn't catch everything you were indicating in your presentation related to this, maybe the time frame, because as Mark indicates, if we have a cable under the sea connecting Europe and the United States or Latin America, where I come from, with Europe, at the end of its lifespan, this cable will turn on. It could maybe turn back to the use. So how do you think, or maybe expect, this could be happening, and how we could reach these periods of time where we will be able to at least take, of course, maybe the most of it?
That's a really tough question. I think a lot
Yeah,
of people
I know.
deal with that. And so far, as we see in the last decades, so let's say, recycling rate as another indicator, not mentioned yet, but
Yeah.
it's not growing. It's even going down, I would say. Yeah. So in average, I think in Europe, we're at 12% and stuck to that. So a lot of efforts in circular economy are made, but the implementation is missing, as it seems. So I was optimistic for a long while, but right now it seems that reality is a bit different. And I have no solution for that, really. So we have a lot of initiatives, activities, also consumer-driven things, and people are more aware, of course, but still we don't go ahead and are stuck to 12%. That's rubbish.
It. And Benedict, maybe you could come on to this discussion, and what do you find in your indicators is really supporting the idea of, as Mark says, work with this depletion for use instead of depletion for wasting at the end of the lifespan of the metals in this case?
Yeah, so through the indicators, you can see that for the topic of industrial and urban symbiosis, the main topic is from the R strategies, or from the perspective of the R strategies, that reduce is mostly the topic that is covered, because yeah, the main contribution of industrial symbiosis has to be, or is from literature view, to be to reduce, for example, waste, but also input materials for some companies or for some manufacturing companies, for example, also metals. And so the view of the industrial symbiosis indicators is not only on the end of life and on the waste stream, but also on the input stream, on how to reduce inputs for the companies.
Thank you, Benedict. And finally, Marcia, I think we arrived to your research at last during this discussion. So maybe you could come up to the discussion and try to wrap up everything.
Yes, I mean, I talk about them on social LCA, no? So
Yeah.
it's the complementary approach of what
It's a complementary
other three,
approach.
exactly.
Yeah.
And actually, we are also, because I mentioned, I mean, Benedict and Stefan, Stefan was talking about circularity, no? Circularity, we also explore, not in my presentation now, but because the ISO now is there is much more interest from the company coming to have a social LTA. And we also ask ourselves in another PhD with Anna Lutin, what means social impact for circularity? No, so because circularity is a completely new way to think. We try to measuring, but it's more than just recycling, as we know. It's this needs a completely new transition for the society. Which are the impact on workers, on local communities? So what can be positive and negative consequences for the social aspect? I think that's the ISO can support to at least structure and understanding how the methodology should be applied. That's I think I hope it can support.
And I think that, as you say, the social aspect of the extraction and finally the use or depletion of natural resources, in this minerals, in this case, has huge impact in communities. Coming from a miner country myself, we are the biggest exporter of copper in the world.
Exactly.
And a lot of lithium also. So maybe analyzing everything will help us in doing it. Mark, you have your hand.
Yeah, maybe to complement what Marcia said, I think, there's a very strong link that needs to be further elaborated between circular economy and so the environmental, but also the social dimension. If you look into, to give you one example, if you look into recycling, what we can see is that, especially in the step of collecting materials, we have a lot of small and medium-sized enterprises. It's often enough, a one-person shop driving around, even here in Germany, with a truck collecting scrap from private households. So it is creating a lot of jobs in the SME sector, and that is something that needs to be considered, where we feel that it is important when we look into classical circular economy concepts. Then recycling is one of the options, but it's not the preferred option. Ideally, we steer towards reuse. We avoid that material has to be recycled, as it is still energy intensive. But I think, the important point from our perspective is to consider all dimensions and to keep in mind that if you steer towards reuse, it might also have an impact on the social side.
Yeah, it will. I'm sure of it. Maybe you don't picture how it is, but in copper mining are at 4,000, 5,000 meters high, and workers work 15 days over there, then go down, stay with their family maybe 2-3 days, goes up again. And miners come from sometimes 2,000 kilometers. So for those 3 days, they cannot go back home. they stay in the town. So there is a huge impact now with the extraction of metals that everybody uses. So I think these discussions can really put the issue where it is really, which is us as humankind, what our needs, and where are we taking it in the following years. Marcia.
My point is always because I know when we talk about social, there is like a bit of afraid. No, the company is afraid to open Pandora vase. No, so Pandora box. So that's why I always say yes, there are some risk, but there are also some positive impact because it's true that the workers has a lot of issues. Is all, but the other side they have a job. They can guarantee their family to have a proper life. No, so it's important to be able to understand what is the alternative. So what is the context also? That's the tricky point of social LCA. You have to know what is the context there and what you can improve because always we want to improve. That's the main. So find what is the strength and the weakness, but then try to find a measure to improve. For sure, mining sector as well, electronics as well, textile as well, agriculture and food. All these sector I mentioned, these are very important also for the social dimension of sustainability.
Well, thank you very much. I don't know if there is any question from the audience. I can see you guys, so if not, I thank our speakers, and it's been a really nice discussion with you. So see you maybe next World Resource Forum.